You would have heard of the NSA, the top secret intelligence agency responsible for global monitoring and data collection of foreign and domestic intelligence. Well, Mike Rogers was director of the NSA from 2014 when Obama was president and through to 2018 under Trump. He's also a highly decorated former US Navy admiral, and he serves on the Global Advisory Forum of CyberCX. Admiral Rogers joins me now from Melbourne. Thank you very much for your time. It's great to have you in Australia.
It's great to be back, Sharri, and as well as coming back, hey, congratulations to you on coming back.
Thank you very much. Now, you've most recently been in Munich, in London, in Davos, meeting with security and intelligence leaders. What are the biggest threats keeping the Western intelligence agency bosses up at night?
Well, I'll give you my opinion. I don't speak directly for them, but clearly Russia, Ukraine, China, great interest in where is technology going, what are the national security implications for technology. Then lastly, I always thought the hardest job of an intelligence professional was trying to anticipate the unknown or previously unseen, like a pandemic, for example, that we hadn't witnessed in over a century.
Yeah. Look, I want to ask you about the relationship between China and the United States. The spy balloon that was shot down was just so extraordinary. What is China trying to do here with such an obvious, overt move in the United States?
Right. So my personal opinion, I suspect that was probably not their intent. Did they want to launch a balloon designed to gather intelligence against some parts of the United States? Yes. I'm not sure they meant for it to fly across the continental United States, but I think the most important thing here is less about what any intelligence they might gain, because the intelligence they would have gained likely was not significant. But why would you engage in an activity that just so visibly penetrates the sovereign territory of a nation, not just the United States, of any nation?
Exactly. That's my question. It's just extraordinary. And so where do you think the tensions between the US and China are headed? I mean, the relationship, even with the Democrats, it's very antagonistic.
Right. I mean, clearly it shows you how in the current dynamic, even small things like a balloon suddenly take on much larger implications. It shows you where we are in this relationship. The good news, I think, is you saw it in Bali on the margins of the G20. You saw it with Secretary Blinken in Munich earlier over the weekend. The leadership of both nations, I think, wants to engage in a dialogue. The challenge is, how can you engage in a meaningful dialogue when you see actions like this? And then you watch how the Chinese responded. They could have said, we regret this. It certainly was not our intent. We look forward to working with the United States and ensuring similar kinds of activities don't happen again. Instead, they outright lied about the characterization of what the balloon was doing, and then they refused to talk to the United States in the midst of all of this. That's not the way you solve problems, and that's not the way you help to create a better relationship between our two nations.
Yeah. Now, you and I first spoke. I first interviewed you when I was writing my book, investigating the origins of COVID-19. And in the course of that interview for the book, you said to me that you were in a different place to Trump on Russia, that he listened to your advice, but that he had a different view. Given that we've now seen how, aggressive Russia has been in Ukraine, do you think the Trump administration underestimated Putin and that Trump underestimated Putin?
Look, one thing that always struck me as part of the Trump team, the United States, we enacted a series of sanctions. We took a series of very visible moves to highlight our concerns and the fact that we felt some of Russia's behavior was unacceptable. Now, the president at times would often choose not to necessarily directly raise those issues with his counterpart, or at times he wouldn't try to reinforce the message that broader U.S. policy under his direction that we are implementing. I think what you've seen over the last couple of years, particularly since this is the second Russian invasion of Ukraine, the first in February of 2014 focused on occupying the Crimea. This current one, which started literally almost a year ago, February 24th of 2022, I think that shows you that a Russia-led Putin has no regard for the norms of international behavior and believes that it is perfectly reasonable for them to actually execute armed aggression against a neighbor in a way we have not seen in Europe for 70 years.
Now, back to the topic of the origins of COVID-19, your view when I interviewed you in 2021 was that the circumstantial evidence could point to a laboratory origin, but that it wasn't definitive. Has your view changed almost 2 years on?
No, based on what I know, and I'm the first to admit, I am no longer in the business I used to be. I personally still don't know enough to say, hey, look, I think this was something released from a laboratory in China. I personally don't have that level of knowledge or comfort.
In terms of cyber attacks, this seems to be the new way of warfare. We had our former Prime Minister Scott Morrison just give a speech where he said that it's going to be bites, not bombs. Why is cybersecurity, why does it pose such a threat?
Because increasingly, our economic models, our personal lives, the security of our nation are built around this idea of the ability to move data almost anywhere, to store massive amounts of data, and to have connectivity that is totally non-interrupted, that we can count on, that we believe is actually accurate and stable. If you take that away, think about what that does to our economic models. Think about what that does to our own sense of personal security. Think about what that does to the implications of national security. We have created this hyper-connected, incredibly data-driven world in which many of the mechanisms that generate all that activity are not the best defended from a cybersecurity standpoint.
You know what I think is going to shock you? The United States and the UK banned Chinese security cameras from being used as surveillance and CCTV in government buildings last year, and we still have them in our critical infrastructure in some of our most sensitive government buildings, Hikvision and Doha. I mean, it's extraordinary.
And I know you're working your way through this. I think what it shows you is every nation needs a process in which it assesses the risk of using certain types of equipment and connectivity. In the U.S. and in the U.K., we looked at it and said, look, we're just really uncomfortable with this. And I know my Australian teammates are doing that now. It also highlights this isn't as if much of this is brand new or equipment that's about to be installed. Most of these cameras, for example, have been around for a decade or so. So it's also about going back and looking at what equipment do we currently have installed that we're in a totally different environment now, represents a level of risk that wasn't there when it was first installed 10 years ago.
Exactly. Mike Rogers, it was wonderful to have you on the program and look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you, Sharri. I look forward to the next book, by the way.